Thank you very much. The present world system is certainly unsustainable. This is a striking statement is included in the encyclical Laudato Si. Now, this statement, the present world system is certainly unsustainable, should be taken seriously, even from the point of view of the analysis of international relations. Now, this concept of world system exists in the international relation theory and practice, but it is understood in a radical different way from the one used in the encyclical. For instance, in the structural realist approach to international relation, world system, it means that the world is a very dangerous place, and every state should be ready to defend itself, because there is no real international authority capable of defending the security of one state. The other way in which this concept is used, it is the concept of world system in international political economy, where the asymmetry and shortcomings of the international and global capitalist economy are taken into account. Now, if we had to say that in the encyclical Laudato Si there is a concept of world system, we should say that it is understood, this notion, in a radical different way, as the fact that all of us are linked by unseen bonds and together form a kind of universal family, a sublime communion. Now, this notion of communion is familiar to the Catholic and Christian discourse, but totally uncommon and unfamiliar to the analysis of world affairs. You can talk about international community, but you never talk of international relation in terms of communion. So there is a need to find a way to understand this in the context of real international relation. Now, one statement that is repeated over and over in the encyclical is that everything is connected. Now, there are also different ways of understanding this phrase. In my opinion, it has little to do with the connectivity, the fact that the world is increasingly being linked together by the World Wide Web, or even with connectography, this innovative research by Professor Parag Khanna about the emerging global network civilization, where the growing internet connection between megacities is more relevant than state borders. And let me say that this statement, everything is connected, also this time declares the innocence of the famous Chinese butterfly, of the chaos theory, that is too often unfairly accused of causing tornado in Texas just by flapping her tiny wings. So the butterfly has nothing to do with that. The interconnection outlined in the Laudato Si has to do with a relational narrative, rather than being a reference to an objective connection. Because all creatures are connected, each must be cherished with love and respect. A more precise appraisal of word connection reads that everything is related. And this seems to echo the famous Kantian, Kant has been always already mentioned today, the Kantian formulation of cosmopolitanism as expressed in the project of perpetual peace. A violation of rights in one part of the world is felt everywhere. Already Benedict XVI brought this aphorism to the next level. Every violation of solidarity and civic friendship harms the environment. Now, in the jargon of diplomacy and the practice of international relation, one word that you can find in almost every document today is the adjective comprehensive. So the incredible high recurrence of comprehensive in international document is beyond comprehension. This is also the case from climate diplomacy. Now, the good news is that the interconnection outlined in the encyclical, rather than being comprehensive, is holistic, multidimensional, and violates, and this is also a lesson for the academia, all the rigorous academic epistemological tenets of the disciplines, fields and subfields, bring it together in the same context: science, technology, anthropology, moral theology, international relations, global economy. And this is the idea of integral ecology that also requires an integral approach to the study of the current state of affairs of the world. And therefore, this reading of the current state of the world is neither rhapsodical nor inconsistent and incoherent. There is one conceptual lens, in my opinion, through which our present global human condition is interpreted: the concept of care, the notion of responsibility. Now, in our technocratic world, power is never considered in terms of responsibility, rather is connected to the notion of utility or security. And besides, one of the most difficult issues in international relations is the debate on moral agency and responsibility. Who is responsible for what in a plethora of international relevant actors, such as nation states, international organizations, transnational corporations, non-governmental organizations, big decision makers in the global economy? When it comes to moral agency, the normative approach to international relations insists on duties and obligations. Something must be done. The international history, on the other side, insists on blame and accountability. Never again. In the present controversy on climate change, the debate is not so different from other domains, like financial speculation and global poverty, or selling weapons in relation to the spreading of conflict or instability. Now, this issue of moral agency, of responsibility, in the encyclical is raised in a direct and explicit way. The ethics of international relations implies the acknowledgement of differentiated responsibilities toward the poor, the weak, and the vulnerable. It combines normative and empirical evaluation of the asymmetrical condition between states and other international actors. Now, one way of making more concrete this approach and this engagement toward the environment is based, for instance, on the concept and the practice of energy democracy. Energy democracy means that everybody is ensured access to sufficient energy. Energy production must thereby neither pollute the environment nor harm people. More concretely, this means that fossil fuel resources must be left in the ground. The means of production need to be socialized and democratized, and that we must rethink our overall attitude towards energy consumption. Now, think of solar energy. Solar energy can be also not only an element, an important element of going towards renewable sources of energy, but also a potent factor towards empowerment and democracy. When you don't have a centralized power that distributes energy, especially in poor countries, and you empower villages on cities to be autonomous in terms of generating energy, you also created the condition for democracy. Another consequences of this approach, holistic approach to the integral ecology, is trying to link phenomena that apparently are very distant from each other. For instance, climate insecurity, human security, and conflict. For instance, desertification affects large areas of the globe, producing serious problems in the livelihood of millions of human beings. And this can cause interstate or intrastate conflicts due to the scarcity of natural resources and the structural change in terms of food production and water availability. In the encyclica, also, the Pope talks about the need for a new dialogue and the fact that we need a conversation which includes everyone, since the environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect all of us. And this is an important point. International relations are dialogical and can be compared to an ongoing permanent conversation that is inclusive and on an equal footing. Scholar Avishai Margalit wrote that on the whole, political compromises are a good thing. Political compromises for the sake of peace are a very good thing. Shoddy and shoddy compromise are bad, but not sufficiently bad to be always avoided at all costs, especially not when they are concluded for the sake of peace. So you should bear in mind all this when we talk today, and we hear today in international life to talk about bad deals. Perhaps the Paris Agreement is not the excellent agreement that everyone would have liked, but it's very difficult to think that is a bad agreement if it has been endorsed by 196 states and reached at the culmination of 23 years of ongoing negotiation. I think that in this case, the sake of national interest is a little bit misleading. The very notion of national interest today should be criticized, in my opinion, and revised. For instance, it is impossible today to talk about national interest without talking of intergenerational solidarity on a basic question of justice that consider not only space, actual citizens on a given territory as the object of political realm, but also time, the future members of the policy. So this global conversation is really needed also for future generation. What I like to say at the end, and I'm going to close my remarks, is that sometimes we do not think of the fact that international politics today is always biopolitics. Why? Because it has to do with the stockpiles of nuclear weapons capable of destroying the entire planet several times. It has to do with the lack of food security and access to clean water in many areas of the world. It is the case of biochemical weapons, but it's also the case for increasing loss of biodiversity and for the severe pollution in very area of the world. One of the tenets of realism in international relations was that the first occupation of a state should be the survival of the state and the security of the citizens. Now we have to favor a transition towards another notion, which is eco-realism, and that claims that in fact the ultimate global goal in our situation is not only the survival of our state, but the global survival, the survival of mankind.